Good morning everyone and welcome to our remote meeting of the Durham County Council County Planning Committee. May I introduce myself? I'm Councillor John Robinson, Chair of the committee. Please note this meeting is being streamed live to the Council's website and will be available for viewing for a minimum of 6 months. I'd like to give a warm welcome to members, officers and any members of the public or indeed media who are watching this live stream of this meeting. I would like to extend a warm welcome to the members of the public who have registered to speak this morning. Good morning, Mr. Hunt. Before we commence with the formal business on the agenda, I would like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow in order to make the meeting as efficient as possible. Please do bear with us at this time, as it's quite new to all of us. For those participating in the meeting, please only speak when invited to do so. Please keep your microphone on mute unless invited to speak. Members of the committee, if you wish to speak, please type RTS in the chat function and that will indicate to me that you wish to speak. We then also move on to once invited to speak, please introduce yourself. That's when you're speaking for the first time, and then after that it's fine. If I lose my connection, please I note that and welcome Councillor Fraser Tinsley. Fraser will take over as Vice Chairman until my connection is reconnected. Good morning, Fraser.
Morning, John.
We then have officers in attendance today and I'd ask them to introduce themselves. Can we begin with Neil Carter?
Morning, Chair. My name's Neil Carter. I'm the solicitor to the committee.
Ian Croft.
Good morning, Chair. My name's Ian Croft. I'll be overseeing the running of the committee.
Martin Tyndale.
Morning, Chair. Martin Tyndale, Committee Services Officer.
And the main presenter this morning from behalf of the Council, Laura Eden.
Good morning, Chair. I'm Laura Eden, Senior Planning Officer.
Can we say thank you very much to all 4 of these officers their work will be invaluable. So we move on. Item 1, apologies for absence. Ian?
We have apologies from Councillors Hawley, Kay, Simpson and Wilson.
And do we have any substitute members?
Yes, we have Councillor Maitland as substitute member for Councillor Wilson.
Can we say good morning to Joyce? I know Joyce is a very staunch member of several planning committees, and welcome Joyce to the meeting. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of July. Do we have anybody wishing to propose them?
I move them, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Chair.
Alan, yes, Councillor Shields, Alan.
I did intend to ask for a minor amendment of those minutes. And it's to do with the West Bradley application. The officer wrote on paragraph 1, and I paraphrase, that the site was to generate some 520,000 tonnes, which is referred in paragraph 1. Following a meeting that I've had with Lewis Stokes, who was the liaison manager for Banks, he has stated that the final tonnage will be nowhere near that figure of 520,000 tonnes, very disappointingly. So it was my intention to ask for the minutes to be amended to say up to 520,000 tonnes. But to be fair to the officer who's responded, she has stated that it is always an estimate based on ground investigations and the final amount can end up being either more or less than the old workings. So rather than saying up to 520,000, I think the word some probably does paraphrase it, but it does mean that the final tonnage, whatever it is, will mean that we get less than 10 pence per tonne from the Bradley site. So just for information purposes, for the benefit of the Strategic Planning Committee, Chair.
I don't know whether we can do that, Alan. I'll ask Neil Carter, because the minutes are actually a record of what was presented at that particular time. And clearly you've been told that after. So whilst I think what you've done is more of a matters arising, Alan, than an alteration to the minutes, because we can only minute what we were told. And I am very worried about altering minutes, because that could then affect the decision we've made and perhaps give grounds for appeals. But I'll bow to the advice of Neil.
So,
Neil?
Neil, before you mention, it was my intention to ask for a change in the minutes, but it's not now appropriate because the wording wouldn't be right. So I'm just going to, it's just for information purposes for the committee. I don't want the minutes changed because it's not relevant now.
Thank you, Alan. Neil?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with what you've said, and thank you to Councillor Shield for clarifying that. I mean, he's not actually asking for any amendment to the minutes. It's just an information item. So I think we can proceed as usual on that.
Thank you. Thank Neil. Thank you, Alan. Mark, you want to come in on the minutes?
Yeah, bottom of page 39 of the report, where it states what I commented on. It says, however, he noted the MPPF requires that the national benefit be considered and therefore it was to consider digging. We need to put in there was necessary to consider whether digging. Otherwise, it implies that I thought it was in the national interest. So could we add in it, therefore it was necessary to consider whether digging? Because it is actually what I said, but it's just that by reading it, it makes it look like the opposite.
Fine. Yeah, that's fine. If that's what you said, fine. With that alteration, I've got a proposer for the minutes. Can I have a seconder? So I'll take it that Mark, you're seconding as you've just agreed that.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. We then now move on to the declaration of interest. Do we have anybody wishing to declare an interest? No. Therefore, can we now move on to item 5, applications to be determined by the County Planning Committee this morning. Good morning, Laura. We're all over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen now. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that now.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so item 5A relates to application DM/20/000069/FPA for 12 additional dwellings, therefore 132 dwellings in total, linked to earlier outlined and reserved matters applications for the erection of 120 dwellings at land to the east of Mill Lane, Sherburn. This is the site location plan with the application site outlined in red. It extends to approximately 5.49 hectares and is a roughly triangular shaped parcel of former agricultural land on the southern edge of Sherburn village. The site is bordered to the north by rear boundaries of village residential properties, including those of Sherburn Farm, Chapel Court and South Street. To the south is further agricultural land with a former railway line walkway running in a northwest-southeast direction, plus a woodland trail beyond. The route of the public right-of-way is shown by the purple dash line. To the east runs a bridleway in a northwest-southeast direction, please see the green dash line, with agricultural land beyond. To the west of the site is Mill Lane, the C12A and the rear boundaries of Mill Lane properties, with further homes on the western edge of Mill Lane at the Crescent and Sherburn Way beyond. No statutory or locally designated landscapes or ecological sites are located within or immediately adjacent to the application site. The Sherburn Conservation Area boundary immediately abuts the application site to the north, with approximately 0.09 hectares of the site in the northeast corner lying within the conservation area. The extent of the conservation area is shown by the faint pink wash. This is an aerial photograph of the site. It more clearly shows the site's relationship with surrounding land uses. The site already benefits from planning permission for 120 dwellings and work commenced on the site in June 2019. The new highways access onto Mill Lane and Show Home is complete, and at the time of writing the report, 2 of the properties were occupied, with approximately 28 more under construction. The current application seeks full planning permission for 132 dwellings, which is an additional 12 dwellings on top of the 120 dwellings already consented through the earlier outline and reserve matters consent. The as-approved layout is shown in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and the proposed layout is the larger main plan. There is no net increase in developable area, therefore in order to achieve the additional units on site, there has been a partial replan, including remixing of a number of plots to introduce additional semi-detached and smaller units when compared against the reserve matters layout. The areas highlighted in a yellow wash are the areas of proposed change when compared against the approved plan. As you can see, large areas of the site remain unaltered and as approved, including the majority of the internal road structure. The proposed housing mix under this application includes 16 2, 63 number 3 bedrooms, 38 number 4 bedrooms and 15 number 5 bedroom, 2 and 2.5 storey properties, all of which come in a mix of detached, semi-detached and terrace options. One new house type has been introduced, with all others being the same as under the previous reserve matters approval. All properties features off-street parking, a mix of integral and detached garaging and enclosed rear gardens. Vehicular access would be taken from Mill Lane in accordance with the details agreed through the outline approval. These works are now complete. Development will be arranged around a main road passing through the development sites. Cul-de-sacs, private shared drives and individual dwellings will be taken off this main road. Areas of public open space are proposed adjacent to the entrance, along with sub-basins and additional to green space along the western flank of the main road, along the eastern and partially the northern boundary. Conditions are proposed to be reimposed to secure the peripheral structural landscaping to the southern boundary, the implementation of general landscaping and the maintenance of that thereafter. This slide shows some of the proposed elevations. The material palettes proposed includes 2 different red multi-bricks, a grey tiled roof and art stone heads and sills to some properties as opposed to contrasting brick. Windows and doors are proposed to be white UPVC. So this is a recent photo of the site entrance into the estate off Mill Lane, which has been completed in accordance with the previously approved details. The site access and traffic impacts associated with the substitution of plot types and increase in 12 number of dwellings are set out in the transport statement. The traffic impacts associated with the development are considered to be acceptable, subject to a condition being imposed to secure improvements to the Mill Lane B1283 mini roundabout junction, replicating condition 10 of the outline approval. The agreed works, including a realignment, lining and signage scheme to the approved, improve the safety and capacity prior to the occupation of the 50th dwelling on site. A number of objections received raised specific concerns in relation to the road safety audit. This has followed Department for Transport guidelines, and all issues raised have been addressed by designers and accepted by the Highway Authority as the overseeing organisation for the highway network. The Highway Authority considered that the existing access is designed to acceptable standard using acceptable design principles and parameters. There are no outstanding road safety issues and the development access is deemed to be acceptable from a road safety perspective. This is a photograph taken from within the site and shows some of the properties which have already been constructed under the earlier approvals. The proposed house types are considered to be acceptable, with reference taken from the character and appearance of the Sherburn Conservation Area, combining brickwork alongside the heads and sills to provide visual interest and lift the overall quality. There are a range of house types and true corner turning units are utilised at street junctions, providing visual relief within the development. This is another photograph taken from within the site showing the relationship between the new development and existing properties on Mill Lane. Separation distances with external properties to the development are comfortably achieved. As such, it is not considered that any significant adverse issues in terms of overlooking, overshadowing or overbearing impact would arise, and as such there would be no significant adverse residential amenity impacts. Since the publication of the committee report, 2 further letters of representation have been received. Councillor Kellett maintains his objection to the development, and a further letter of objection has been received from a local resident. This slide outlines a summary of the main responses received in relation to this planning application, including these 2 additional responses. A more detailed summary is included within my recommendation report. The Plan and Policy section have advised that the principle of developing this site for housing was established under earlier approvals. Significant progression has been made on site, therefore the principle of development should not be revisited under this application, the key issue being determining whether or not the additional dwellings have an acceptable impact. The Highway Authority advised that a transport statement has been produced to support the substitution of plot type and increase in numbers. The traffic impacts are considered acceptable. Access to the site has not been altered and the layout has carried forward the previously approved parking arrangements and standards. Following amendments to the layout to address earlier concerns, no objections are raised. Remaining statutory, internal and external consultees raised no objections subject to conditions and informatives. Councillor Kellett has now submitted 2 letters of representation strongly objecting to the proposal. He is strongly critical of the way that the road safety audit has been carried out only after planning permission has been granted and building work commenced. This raised a raft of unacceptable problems which could give rise to road traffic accidents. The additional traffic generated by this development will likely have adverse impacts for Mill Lane and local residents, in addition to the mini roundabout in the centre of the village. The proposal is likely to impact on the local GP surgery. He's also concerned that Persimmon will not consider the impacts of local residents or planning conditions. Councillor Hall commented and advised he did not wish for this to be a delegated decision because of its importance and potential impact on the village. He also considers there is a need to discuss additional benefits to the village under new policies and any discretionary contributions the developer may see fit to include within their agreement. The application has been publicised by way of a press notice, site notice and individual notification and letters to neighbouring residents. Overall, 8 letters of public objection have now been received. Objections relate to a range of matters including highways issues, the impact on local amenities and facilities, that developers should not be able to make post-permission changes, the impact to residential amenity, and that residents objected to the original development and feel that they have been ignored. In conclusion, the acceptability of the application should be considered in the context of the planning balance test contained within paragraph 11D of the NPPF. The principle of developing the site for housing was established under planning permission DM/16/00400/OUT, with the detail resolved under the reserved matters approval. Significant progression has been made on site, therefore the principle of development should not be revisited under this application, the key issue being determining whether or not the additional dwellings have an acceptable impact. Overall, the additional 12 number dwellings can be accommodated within the site without materially diminishing the overall quality of the previously approved scheme, and the impacts arising have been fully mitigated through additional Section 106 contributions. The scheme is considered acceptable in all other respects. No adverse impacts of any significance have been identified in relation to 12 additional dwellings being accommodated with the development, which benefits from extant consent. For the purposes of paragraph 11D, any adverse impacts arising would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the recognised social and economic benefits of new housing, even when considering the Council's housing supply position. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval.
As always, thank you very much, Laura. At this moment in time, we have 2 registered speakers. One is Councillor David Hall, the local member, and second, Mr. Paul Hunt on behalf of Persimmon. Unfortunately, Councillor Mr. Hall cannot attend today, but all members were circulated by email with his submission. And Ian, you've got a copy of that submission and you've kindly agreed to read it out. So, Ian, can we ask you to read Councillor Hall's submission?
Thank you, Chair. I am sorry I will not be able to attend the meeting due to work commitments. The committee team have kindly agreed to read out the statement on my behalf, and I have circulated a copy to planning committee members beforehand, accompanied by a copy of the Council's December 2019 road safety audit of the new junction of this development. In relation to the Persimmon Mill Lane development's amendment, I respectfully ask that committee members propose, second, and support a condition upon any planning permission granted, requiring that the 30-mile-per-hour zone be moved to a suitable location on the other side of the new junction and pedestrian crossing with appropriate signage, lining and gateway features as appropriate. The reasons for this request are that road safety is a significant concern surrounding the entrance to this development. A road safety audit jointly commissioned by the County Council and Persimmon was recently carried out by the Council's Accident Investigation Team's officers. Most of its recommendations are being implemented, including a newly improved pedestrian crossing in what is currently the 40-mile-per-hour zone. Page 13 of the Council's December 2019 Road Safety Audit recommends that if the entrance to the development cannot be moved, then the 30-mile-per-hour zone be moved to a suitable location on the other side of the new entrance and pedestrian crossing with suitable lining and village gateway works done, but this has not been done. This is a low-cost piece of work and could be easily implemented. The development, its new junction, its increased capacity pedestrian crossing, and all the additional use by its residents, cars and footfall of residents from this development, including those to benefit from this amendment, necessitates that this sensible and reasonable action be taken. The original development on Mill Lane of 120 houses was very controversial. After a drawn-out planning process, outline permission was reluctantly granted, and Persimmon later bought the site and now seek to amend it to add 12 dwellings on the same site. They have begun building houses on the site and the new junction with its new central lane turning space. I have worked with residents, fellow councillor Bill Kellett, parish council and officers over the past few years to address issues raised over the original planning application, issues over the management of the development, and to improve the benefits and lessen the impact of this development and this amendment. Road safety is a big concern, and this amendment application and the adoption and safety assessment process that accompany it provides an opportunity for local people and this committee's members to appropriately address one of the most significant concerns. The nearby pedestrian crossing point has now been amended to accommodate increased use by pedestrians, cyclists and mobility scooters as part of this development, yet it remains in the 40-mile-per-hour zone. This road past the new junction is a very well used national cycle route, even more so during the recent COVID-19 pandemic. Following the road safety audit's recommendations, it would seem sensible for the council to request the developers make this amendment. It is only necessary because of this development and this amendment add on to it. Some speed data was collected and the 85th percentile speeds in this area of the 40-mile-per-hour zone were said to be around 35 miles per hour. Speeding above 40 miles per hour is not the issue to be addressed. Safety is, as per the council's own safety audit recommendations. The 85th percentile speeds of 35 miles per hour would indicate that reducing the speed limit down to 30 miles per hour is achievable and so credible, especially if supported by appropriate signage and gateway works to highlight the change to drivers as recommended. As we all know, the risk of serious injury or death to pedestrians, children and cyclists hit by cars and HGVs travelling over 30 miles per hour increases dramatically. I have spoken to representative of Persimmon recently when discussing this and other requests, and they said they would do this if formally asked to by the council. The relevant senior highways officer has told me that he does not mind if it is moved, and the manager of the strategic highways team has told me he sees the sense in moving it as well. The above may appear to be a simple, sensible, required and straightforward thing to do, and it is. It is, however, necessary for the committee to add a condition today to make it happen, otherwise it will not be done. I would therefore be very grateful if the committee will please request and vote in favour of the condition for the 30-mile-per-hour zone be added. Thank you for considering this application today and my statement.
Thank you, Ian. Before we go into Mr. Hunt, can I just give warning to John McArdle, our highways officer. I will be, before opening it to members, John, asking you for your comments on both Councillor Hall's written statement, which was in depth, but also referenced by Councillor Kellett. And certainly in Councillor Hall's statement, he refers to officers in agreement. So John will take you straight after Mr. Hunt, if you don't mind. Mr. Hunt, welcome to the meeting. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Hunt, to present your case. At around 4 minutes into your presentation, Ian, the gentleman you just heard, will give you a warning that you've got 1 minute left. So over to you, and thank you for your input, Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I hope everyone is safe in these uncertain times. My name is Paul Hunt, and I'm here today as a representative of Persimmon Homes to speak in support of this application. I would first like to thank the consultees on their work and help on this application, especially the hard work by Laura. The development site is located in a sustainable location and is well located and in close proximity to a range of key services within the local area and beyond. The site is also well connected to the surrounding areas by both public and private transport links. This application offers the opportunity to enhance further a new sustainable residential development within the Shapen area of Durham through the adjustment of housing offered to more closely align with the current housing demand of prospective residents. As members will be aware, this site has already benefits from an outline and reserve matters approval for the development of 120 homes. Pre-commencement conditions have been discharged, development has commenced, and we are now actively marketing and selling homes on the site. Through early marketing engagement and sales inquiries, it is apparent that the housing product offered by the consented scheme is not entirely reflective of the type and size of housing within which the local market is demanding, with a large proportion interested purchase seeking smaller size family homes. Accordingly, this application seeks to remix the house type schedule and incorporate a greater provision of such homes. In doing so, while still constraining the developable area to that which has already been approved, an additional 12 homes can be provided, ensuring the efficient use of the land whilst retaining the key design principles of the development. Sorry. As shown in the proposed 132 unit layout, when compared against the approved 120 unit layout, the development maintains the development principles as set by the outline of the reserve matters applications. The internal road structure remains unchanged to that already approved. Additionally, the developable area also remains unchanged, ensuring that the approved areas of public open space remain unaffected by the increase in number of units. As a result, the development will continue to deliver good principles outlined with the MPPF, which seek to create a high quality, attractive development which aims to be respectful and complementary of the surrounding area. Development would also continue to employ the use of traditional building materials to achieve a level of complementary development within the surrounding area. Vehicle access to the site will be from Mill Lane. Vehicle access to the site has previously been approved under the approved outline application. This application intends to utilise the design of the already approved site access. Transport statement has been produced and submitted, which summarises the approved transport assessment, mitigation proposals for the 120 units, and then assesses the effect of the additional 12 units. Transport assessment concluded that the transport statement concluded that the additional 12 units would not result in an impact on the surrounding network, and the previous approved site access is remaining suitable for the additional 12 units. The road safety assessment of the access has been completed in consultation with Durham County Council to inform and incorporate into the design which has already been delivered on site. Persimmon Homes has worked closely with the planners in Durham Council as well as the council and statutory external consultees. Throughout the adaptation of the proposal and submission of additional reports, plans and information, proposed development meets the requirements of all, whilst also following the principles agreed in the previous applications to allow for a seamless and continuous development across the entire site. The impacts of the development are to be fully mitigated by the development or via a planning gain package to which has been agreed that a range of topping up payments and additional affordable housing provision is to be secured in addition to the current Section 106 items in respect of the additional 12 units. Such that there are no adverse impacts. Such that there are no adverse impacts which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The application is supported by a full suite of supporting reports, assessments, and drawings which have met the requirements of internal council and statutory consultees, including drainage and highways, such that there are no outstanding objections from any of these bodies. We as the applicant contend that the site is highly sustainable in its location, and the proposal will result in high quality, visually attractive development which will help boost the supply of housing and meet more closely identified housing needs of the area. Furthermore, there are no technical issues of any kind associated with the development. This amended scheme is appropriately considered relevant policy and surrounding residents and land users. As a result, there are no adverse impacts which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of developing the site to deliver much needed family housing within this area. I would politely request that the committee support the officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Normally, we would now move over to asking if any member of the committee have any direct questions of you. So before we go into highways, does any member of the committee wish to ask Mr. Hunt a question? Or would you rather go straight to highways and then have the opportunity after highways to talk to Mr. Hunt? I'm getting nods that that's perhaps the best way. OK, John, Mr. McGargle, please could you join us and specifically refer to Councillor Hall's comments and Councillor Kellett's, and then clearly that then lead some questions of Mr. Hunt. John, welcome to this morning's meeting.
Thank you, Chair. I'm John McGargle. I'm the Highways Development Manager for the County Council. The development itself was assessed, the access for the development itself was assessed in 2015 and was assessed on the basis that there is a 40-mile-per-hour limit leading through past the development access. Visibility displays were assessed accordingly and considered acceptable. I've been lobbied relentlessly over the last 5 years, may I say, to agree to a moving of the speed limit, which is presently 30 miles per hour north of the junction, to moving that south of the junction. But we have resisted that. Just to explain to the committee, I've worked for local authorities for 40 years. This is the 4th different local authority I've worked for. And I've never been accused of lying before, but I was actually accused of lying to committee over this application by a local member, which I wasn't very impressed with. I'm not lying to committee. I always take an objective view, which can be defended if necessary in the views that I give. I've worked in and both managed the accident investigation and prevention teams and the road safety audit teams. So I have quite a bit of knowledge, and I apply that knowledge and skill when I'm actually assessing a new development. Turning to the members' concerns, Councillor Kellett raised an issue about the additional traffic in the village. For 12 units, the additional traffic at peak hour would amount to 8 vehicles. If those 8 vehicles split 50-50 and leaving the development, you'd have 4 vehicles entering the village over the peak hour, additional vehicles. I would suggest that that additional 4 vehicles, has no impact whatsoever and is not actually noticeable within the background traffic. Background where there are 5,000 vehicles per day running up and down the lane. So the levels of traffic are insignificant. Councillor Kellett did raise issues about his concerns on road safety audit, as did Councillor Hall. Just taking those concerns into consideration, Councillor Hall has said that there are significant concerns about the safety of the highway. Those concerns that he has are not shared by the Highway Authority. The junction has been assessed, a road safety audit has been undertaken in accordance with government guidelines and national standards, and has been complete and signed off. So we as Highway Authority are happy that this is a safe junction. There's no question that it's a safe junction. Turning to what the actual road safety audit says, and I believe members will provide with a copy of the road safety audit. The item which refers to the junction refers to the proposed junction located on the apex of a bend contributing to visibility issues. I would suggest that the apex of a bend is the best possible place to place a junction if you want to improve visibility. So the road safety audit raised that as an issue, and that has been addressed through the road safety audit process. There are no visibility issues with regards to the junction being on the apex of the bend. That has been demonstrated and proven, technically proving that you have acceptable safe stopping distances for the junction. The road safety audit has said that a potential solution, although what the problem is, I'm not quite clear on, because the apex is the best place to place it. But he said a potential solution was to move the 30 miles per hour. But he recognised and wrote within his statement that there could be credibility and enforcement issues. Now, I would suggest that indeed there will be credibility and enforcement issues. If you move the speed limit, it's not credible because it's outside the built environment area. The 85th percentile speeds are only 35 mile per hour. The junction is designed as a 40 mile per hour junction. So it's designed to accommodate speeds up to 40 mile per hour. So there's no issues with regards to visibility or speeds. So I would say that there probably is an issue with regards to the credibility and possibly enforcement issues. Guidelines which are provided by ACPO, the Chief Police Officers Association, suggest that enforcement can take place where you've got a speed in excess of 10% plus 2 of the posted speed limit. That's 35 mile per hour. So it's unlikely the police would actually enforce anything, even if the speed limit was moved. In effect, moving a sign has no impact whatsoever. Councillor Hall referred to a suggestion that he'd spoken to senior officers and myself, and that we don't mind. I don't mind if speed limits move in the fact that that won't impact upon road safety. It won't make any improvements to road safety. It won't make road safety any worse. My concern would be that if committee take a decision to insist on a condition, that the police may well not support a movement of the speed limit because it lacks credibility and because there's nothing to enforce. My view is that asking for a condition, the condition has to be necessary, the junction's perfectly safe, and therefore the condition that's been requested isn't necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. I have one. So we're now going to questions, and just for questions for clarification only, no statements. That comes as part of the debate. So Fraser, sorry, Councillor Taser, you would like to come in, Fraser?
Thanks a lot, Chair. Just a few things and points of clarification there, mainly towards John, I think. You say that development will generate 8 additional vehicles, which is, in your view, it's not very many, or in the context of the wider area. I just know from my experience, and I'm sure other members elsewhere have similar experience. We all have similar developments to this type of thing in our wards. And I'm sure in my experience, the 12 houses, 12 3-bedroom semis would generate more than 8 vehicles. I know myself, you tend to get 2 vehicles at least often in these properties, and then there may be a van or another vehicle for a grown-up child or something who's living with parents in them. But I just wonder where that figure comes from, because it does seem very, very low. You say 4 of these houses would not have any vehicle whatsoever, and that's assuming the other 8 houses only had 1. So that's just a point of clarification on that. And just then moving on to the issue of the junction. I do take your point that you're very strongly of the view that the existing proposal, which is for the junction in the 40 mile an hour zone, is safe, and I take that on board. But I'll be interested to see what your view is as to whether or not, if the 30 mile an hour zone was moved and the junction was in the 30 mile an hour zone rather than the 40 mile an hour zone, would it be safer than the proposed situation? Because I'm always of the view that you should try and take advantage of situations like this if they arise, to make a situation safer than it would otherwise be. So I would be interested in those views. But I do also take on board your credibility issue as well. Thank you.
Should we find out, Alan? Sorry, there's 2 Alans. Councillor Shields, is your question in relation to John McGargle or not? Because if it isn't, then I'll get John to answer. Fraser.
Yes, Chair. It's just a quick question for John. Given that the application for 120 properties was approved in May 2016, but the Road City audit wasn't started until December 2019, when part of the development had already started. Was there a specific reason for the delay? That's been a question asked by one of the residents, and I would like to know if there was a specific reason why the road safety audit was apparently delayed until 2019, and why it didn't happen before that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I know we have another question lined up, but John, rather than give you too many at one time, do you want to answer them too?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, happy to answer those three questions. First of all, from Councillor Tinsley. 8 vehicle trips at the peak hour. What I'm not told about here is car ownership. I acknowledge that car ownership could be 2 vehicles per unit. However, what I'm talking about here is the trip rate during the peak hour from the development. We know that from research, from surveys that have been done both within County Durham and throughout the country, that residential development tends to generate between 0.5 and 0.65 trips per unit during the peak hour. So that's where we're at less than the 12 trips. There is a computer software model and data collection process that is gone through, which informs the trip rates for different areas within the country. So that's where we've got that figure from. The second question would be if the speed limit was moved to 30 miles per hour, so the sign itself was moved to 30 miles per hour, would it have an impact upon road safety? Posting a sign alone, DFT research has proven that posting a sign alone may have an impact in reducing the speed by 2 miles per hour, no more than 2 miles per hour. So there may be a reduction in the speed from 35 to 33 miles per hour, 85th percentile. It won't make any difference, I would say, to the safety of the road, changing from 35 to 33 miles per hour. Turning now to Councillor Shields' question, the road safety audit. The reason that when we assess a development, when I assess a development, I need to take into account road safety. So I need to have some knowledge and background in accident investigation and road safety audit to be able to apply those skills in assessing a development. So when I'm making recommendations to committee to either accept or refuse a development, it's having already applied that knowledge to the development. The actual road safety audit itself is undertaken on the detailed design of the junction. Now, the developer doesn't undertake a detailed design at the outline stage because members may well refuse to approve a development. So the developer will only request the road safety audit once the detailed design is complete. So the detailed design of the junction was delayed, obviously, and therefore once that was complete, then the road safety audit was complete. We wouldn't do the roads. There's 3 stages to a road safety audit. The first stage is a feasibility stage, which is essentially what I do, which is to say, would it be safe? And I use all the information that's provided in terms of speeds, geometry, etc., to decide whether it's safe or not. That's the stage 1. The second stage is the detailed design stage, and then the third stage is upon completion of the junction itself, where we do a further road safety audit to make sure that we don't identify any further road safety problems. So hopefully that explains, Councillor Shields, why the road safety audit was taken at the time it was, and there is a further road safety audit to undertake, which is a stage 3 road safety audit, because the junction has recently been complete. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. We have 3 more members wishing to ask questions on clarity. Councillor Alan Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And John, ever so much, thank you for your professional opinion there. 100%, I always watch out to hear what you've got to say in these meetings, and I always respect what you have to say. In there, however, with the local members really take it on board in relation to the safety side of things. And I'm just wondering, John, and putting aside all of this sort of the government guidance and everything, you know, would you be, if I'm happy to move a condition, would you be happy in the obviously from what the local member says, Persimmon, you know, them are happy to move it forward if it was formally requested. Could we take it to the police and ask the police, would they support it with putting a condition in and like sort of, you know, put it in their hands? Because at the end of the day, I think from what Fraser said there, you know, to add in safety, you can never have too much safety. I know 2 miles an hour is not a lot, but 2 miles an hour.
It's supposed to be a question, not comment.
Yeah, so the question was, John, would John be happy to take it to, if we were to move a condition on there, to let the police make that decision?
When we come to the decisions, I'll come straight to you, Alan, first and say, let you make your comment. Neil, you want to come in, the solicitor?
Chair, thank you. It was just really to give some advice on the imposition of a condition, because it's been talked about at some length now, and really the short answer to all of that is we as officers don't think that there's sufficient justification for the condition that Councillor Hall's proposed. You know, as members will be aware, there's 6 tests that a condition has to meet. The most important one is whether it's necessary to make the development acceptable. And in this particular case, we don't think there's any impacts that arise from this development which would require the imposition of that condition. You know, the Highways Development Managers said that the existing junction is safe. He's also said that the additional traffic movements associated with the additional units that are proposed here would be negligible in terms of the impacts on the network. So I'm struggling to see what impacts arise in highway safety terms from this development that would require the developer to actually address by way of implementation of a reduction in the speed limit.
Thank you, Neil. We've got 2 more members to speak, then we'll go over back to Laura. Again, it's purely on questions. Councillor Shuttleworth, John, and then Mark. Councillor Wilkes, John.
Yeah, Chairman, it's more the comment that was made about one of our highways officers being accused of lying. I think the local member concerned needs to be apologising, because all the time I've been on this council, there's no highways officer ever lied to me. I've had plenty of arguments, but nobody has ever lied to me, and I think that's totally wrong, mind.
Thank you, John. Mark, Councillor Wilkes.
Yeah, I've had plenty of run-ins with highways officers as well, as John is probably aware of. I've just got a clarification on the point that he made about a 2-mile-an-hour reduction in the speed limit. My understanding was that for every 1 mile an hour reduction in the speed limit, you saw a bigger increase than 1% in the reduction in the number of accidents. And I wonder if you could just clarify, if the speed limit comes down by 2% on a road, what's the actual reduction percentage in the number of accidents? If he knows that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the answer to that is none. It actually reduces the level of severity of the casualty as the speeds are reduced. So it doesn't necessarily reduce the number of accidents that may well occur. It's just as speeds reduce the level of severity of the accidents. And we've all heard, you know, that if you reduce below 20, then 80% of people will survive. We've seen those government figures. So the answer to that is very, very simple. That 2 mile per hour reduction won't actually achieve any reduction in the number of accidents. Having said that, this road does not have an accident statistic problem. There's no accidents anywhere within the vicinity of the junction.
Could I clarify then, Chair, just for my own personal feelings on this? If there were accidents on this road and the speed was 2 miles an hour lower, then what you seem to be suggesting is that the severity of the injuries in that accident would be lower. I've got a few areas similar to this, and one particular location in my area where I think that bringing down the speeds by a small amount could have a significant benefit to reduce the risk of somebody getting seriously injured. And on that basis, I'd be kind of inclined to support the suggested move in.
Mark, can I jump back in? I jumped in on Alan.
I'll hold fire.
It's purely questions. I stopped Alan, so I've got to stop you.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hunt. You got away with that. Nobody wanted to talk to you, so thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, John, for answering the questions. Laura, I assume you won't want to come back because it's all been on highways, but you have the right, Laura, to come back if you wish.
No, that's fine.
I heard
no problem, Chair.
Thank you. So we now move back. I did say to Councillor Bell that when we got into the debate, I'd go straight to him. So Alan, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, I'm happy to listen to the debate. As I said, I'm certainly happy to move the condition and let the police, you know, have some input from the police. It would have been good if we had that. If that was in the report prior to the meeting to see actually the police the take on it. But however, we'll do things the other way around. I'm happy to move the condition and delegate whatever the noose and the cranny of the condition is for that to be delegated between the local members and John himself. Thank you, Chairman.
So, Mark, I interrupted you and got away with it, so I'd better come straight back to you. Mark, no. Now you can have your comment.
Oh, it's quite all right, unless if it's just on highways still, or if it's just generally, Chair.
Generally, we're on to the discussion.
Okay.
It's just I've stopped you and Alan because I said you needed your comments afterwards.
Yeah, I'll listen to what everyone else's views are in relation to the highways issues, but as you know, I've got a specific issue that I wanted to raise in terms of in Durham City area, we've got a policy Q15 regarding public art, and the contribution in this application is £625 per property. But when you actually do all the calculations as to what 1% of public art should be for a site like this, it's massively more. And I feel that 4 years on from the original application, when the average property sale value at the moment on this site appears to be around £193,000, at least the ones that are up for sale at the moment, a contribution of just £600 towards the local community for public art and community improvement just seems like a woefully inadequate amount, and is significantly less than we've seen in applications in other areas, including mine. And it does feel to me a little bit like Sherburn's getting a bit of a hard deal on this. And I feel that public art contribution should be higher. And I don't agree with those comments that come forward that we can't enforce the saved plan, because we can. Policy Q15 is still there. It states in the report that we can consider it. And I don't understand why there hasn't been an increase since 4 years ago in this amount, especially given that we now know that these properties are selling for between £131,000 and £250,000. So could the officers please explain why there hasn't been that inflationary uplift in terms of the £625? And also explain why some sites in Durham City, it's over £1,000 that we end up per property, and others it's only £600, because I feel like Sherburn's being well, it's just not getting the deal that it should do.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We've got Councillor Jim Atkinson, and then we go back to I nearly called you a councillor then, John. I don't know whether that's an upgrade or a downgrade for you, John. We then go back to John McGarkill and Henry Jones. So Councillor Atkinson, Jim.
Chair, we're done with Mr. Gargill, did you say, with John, or are we on the discussion now?
We're on the discussion, but if you want to ask a question, Jim, I'm sure he'll answer, because he's coming up straight after you. Jim, you're muted.
Sorry, John, I was just going to start the debate, if that's in order.
Fire away, boss.
Sorry?
Yes, sir, no problem.
Well, okay then. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, John's answer to the question we've been asked about moving the sign. I mean, when you're looking at somebody with 40 years experience, he gave a very solid answer to that question. And, you know, and he also put his reputation on the line. He's telling you that it's a solid answer. He believes in the answer. I was also interested in the subject that, you know, if we went against his answer, we might get asked questions elsewhere. And as far as this planning exercise is concerned, I'm sure signs, if they're wrong, if Mr. Gargill's wrong, there's something we can do about it later on. So I'm kind of looking at this plan as it stands at the moment. And pretty solidly behind the plan, if you like. We've already looked at it before. We've got 12 extra houses going into a plan that's already been passed off. And the 12 extra houses are actually worked into the plan that's already there. It's not as though they're going to put them somewhere else. They just redesigned the layout, which is more than reasonable. So any objections or concerns or adverse impacts have already clearly been looked at. And I understand again that this application was knocked back in the first place, and then it was successful at an appeal, which if we haven't got the evidence to turn up to fight against the appeal, then something went wrong in the first place. So the plan's being passed off. There's 12 extra houses. So from there, I'm kind of looking at the benefits. And the one thing that stands out is these 106 monies. I mean, £300,000 when you added it all up is an awful lot of money. It's a lot of money, and it's beneficial to the community. On top of that, 12 new houses on top of the 120 that's already there. You know, that's money into the community, rates and things like that. And I mean, they're very nice houses as well. It's going to be very difficult for us to go against the officer's recommendation. And from my point of view, looking at everything that's here, especially the benefits, and the concerns are already have been looked at, and none of them, I can't say where anything demonstrably, you know, that's a big word, demonstrably, outweighs the benefits. So from my point of view, as I say, the other thing can be looked at, the sign thing. I think it's not a red herring. It's very clear it's an important issue. But from this particular plan point of view, I'm in favour of the officer's recommendation. Will be prepared to propose that we go ahead with that.
Thank you. So thank you, Jim. So where we stand is we've got John and Henry, and then we've got Councillor Mr. Tinsley and Councillor Mr. Joe. John, you've registered to speak. You want to come back on something?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come back on Councillor Bell's suggestion that we speak to the police. We do actually speak to the police about speed management strategy, implementation of speed management on practically a daily basis. Our strategic traffic management officers have been consulted and agree with my stance on this. In 2011, the government brought forward a speed management strategy, and in that speed management strategy, it made a big issue of making speed limits credible. And we'll have seen in some sort of areas, maybe some areas that local members are responsible for, that speed limits will actually move nearer to the built environment. So they'll move in towards villages, in towards junctions, etc. Extending the speed limits outside of an area that is not credible, i.e. there's no built environment either side of the junction where we're planning to move the speed limit, is completely contrary to the speed management strategy. So the police have been consulted on this. I'm sure they would not support it because it's contrary to the speed management strategy. Our strategic traffic officers who deal with the police have said they wouldn't support it. I certainly wouldn't see it as being credible. So I just thought I'd sort of respond to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Henry, I'm advised, looking at the time, that Councillor Mrs. Lang came in before you. So Audrey, over to you.
Thanks, Chairman. We've had the professional opinions of a very experienced highways manager and legal advice from Neil, and I can go along with Jim Atkinson, and I'll second his proposal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Audrey. Henry, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in just following the comments from both Councillor Alan Bell and then John McGargill in response to that, and it was just that if there is any kind of conclusion here to move with a proposal to add this condition to the planning permission, it was just to discuss that I think that we need probably final delegated authority to agree the final wording of that, because certainly the one which is proposed within the statement from Councillor Hall, that wouldn't be appropriate in its own right in terms of meeting the test for conditions. And I think that because we will be relying on effectively a third party, and the police here actually agreeing to this movement of the speed limit as well, we probably need to formulate a wording which was negatively worded, so we would have to ensure that the development couldn't get to perhaps a certain point of occupation before that speed limit had to be moved. So I think that, you know, if we do move forward with this condition, if that's what the outcome would be, then I think we'd need delegated authority to get that condition wording right. We'd maybe also just need a steer at what point members would want that to be implemented, whether or not, because the scheme already has planning permission for 120 houses without that condition, whether it might be upon, you know, after the occupation of 120th or something along those lines. But we'd maybe just need a discussion on how it would work, and then we'd just sort out the wording there afterwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Henry. While you're on, Councillor Wilkes asked about art. If I interpret this right, we are only looking at 12 houses. So if we went along with Councillor Wilkes's point, we'd only be increasing the art amount on 12 houses, wouldn't we? Not the remaining other houses, because they've already got permission based upon their last condition.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, any increase in amount that we might request could only be on the 12. I don't believe we could revisit the 120, which already has planning permission. I think in officers' views, I mean, first of all, I think if we just look at what policy Q15, which is the public art policy, actually says, is that the gist of that policy is actually talking about the provision of, or encouraging the provision of, public art on site itself. Now, the actual decision to do a financial contribution as an alternative is just a proposal in lieu, which I understand the local member was perfectly satisfied with, and I understand they didn't have any issue with the amount either. I think any discussion on I mean, I think officers' view is that the amount is proportionate, and the policy itself, it doesn't actually include wording as strong as any public art must be the equivalent of a percent. It talks about a pre-agreed amount being agreed between kind of the council and the developer. It doesn't prescribe that it has to be that 1%. That's my interpretation of it. We're satisfied with the amount and don't believe that we would need to ask for any more. I think if members disagree with that, I think obviously we'd have to bring Paul Hunt in and see whether or not they would be willing to increase the amount. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Henry. So I now have 5 members lined up. Councillor Tinsley, Councillor Jewell, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Clare, Councillor Atkinson. So Fraser, you're first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really comes down to this issue of the condition, doesn't it? Do we include the condition to move the 30-mile-an-hour zone, or do we not? I think that's the main thing. So we have a situation where we have a safe junction, and I'm content that the junction as proposed is safe. We have a situation where if we were to move the junction, move the 30-mile-an-hour zone, and I take comfort from this statement, there would be no reduction in the number of accidents as a result of that. What the impact would be is because there'd be a reduction in 2 miles per hour of the average speeds at that location, there would be a reduction in the severity of injuries to those involved in the accidents. That's the key change that you could potentially achieve by this. So the first point, I'd be interested if there's any clarification for officers. Is that reduction in the severity of injuries pursuant to possible accidents a material consideration that could be used as a justification for inclusion of a condition in the planning permission? That would be the first thing. So then moving on to the credibility issue, and I think this is really important because any benefits that we could gain in terms of reduction in severity of injuries could be outdone by the issue around credibility and the fact that moving it may reduce the credibility. I've seen this happen elsewhere. I do agree that speed limits must be credible because people just ignore them otherwise. So I'd be interested if officers could just give us a little bit more reassurance on the impact of that credibility issue. And finally, just a point of clarification here. As I understand it, police support would not be necessary in order to include a planning condition on a decision such as this. So we would not have to go to the police for their approval on this. Again, just a clarification on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fraser. We'll take Councillor Jewell before we go back to officers, and Councillor Richardson, then we'll go back to officers. Ivan?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I thank everyone that's had an input so far this morning, our planning officer and John, our highways person, and I kind of like to look at things in a logical way, and it's interesting to watch how the discussion is going on this one, because what we already have is planning permission for 120 houses and a safe junction. What it appears is we're trying to use this planning application, this second planning application, to enforce a speed limit or to change a speed limit. For me, that's not logical. If we've said it was a safe junction at the start, the question is, do 20 houses, extra 12 houses, make it an unsafe junction? And I think really the answer to that is no. So we've got permission for a safe junction. Now, I know that we've all got within our areas problems with speeding, and we always get an awful lot of pressure from residents on the speeding issue. And unfortunately, residents' perception of what moving the speed limit does is not quite what the experts say it is. I've had our highways people look at speeding issues. I've had Durham Constabulary look at it, and their perceptions are different. People tend to think that by reducing a speed limit, drivers automatically comply. I have found that not to be the case. So I feel that what we're trying to do is use the planning process to put pressure on moving a speed limit, and I don't think that's a planning consideration. What we need to do is, do those 12 houses make the problem so much worse that we need to change the speeding? Is the speed limit change credible? Because if it's not credible, drivers will take no notice. Do the police have the capacity for enforcement? Because that's another issue. And I think the answer to that is probably no. I think that, yes, I admire the local members for pushing on this, and I can see why they would want to. But I think the planning process has been drawn into something which is not fully a planning matter. And I will go along with supporting the proposer and the seconder on this one. Thanks very much.
No, thank you, Ivan, for your contribution. George Richardson, and then we'll go to John McGargle. George?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm well known for standing up for agricultural land in the first instance, but also I've always got to be in my bonnet about overcrowding. Now, we've heard a lot about highways, in fact, almost in totality, but there's 12 extra houses coming here, which is 10% up on what was agreed. And if you go into any estate pre-built in County Durham, my first impression is, heck, these are packed in, they're crammed in. There's no real room to park with your cars. And I know we can't oppose it, but I've got to speak up and say, well, yes, it's still the same scenario. More houses, need smiles, Fraser, more houses and more profit and less space for people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, George. So I don't think that'll get a response from either of the officers. So, John, do you want to come back, or are you happy with what's being said?
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Tinsley mainly raised a couple of issues. He's right that I said a reduction in speed would reduce the severity of injury in an accident. However, if you are hit at a speed above 30 miles per hour, the chances are that you're going to have a severe accident. There's going to be a severe injury. The causation factors don't change if you reduce the speed to 30 miles per hour. Causes of accidents don't change, but the important thing here is that we don't have an accident problem at this junction. There is no accident problem on Mill Lane. There hasn't been historically in the past, and I've no reason to believe that there will be in the future, because it's designed as a very safe junction. I think Councillor Tinsley also raised the question of credibility. I think I've already explained that the government asked us to look at speed limits and bring them closer to make them more credible closer to built environment. This junction sits outside the built environment, so it wouldn't be a credible junction at 30 mph. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Before I bring in the last two speakers registered, at this moment in time, I've got one proposal from Councillor Bell that we accept the additional houses, but include a condition in regards to the moving of the speed limit, but not a seconder. And I have a proposal and a seconder that we accept the officer's recommendations in totality. So that's where we are at the moment. We've got three speakers now. Councillor Mr. Clare, Councillor Mr. Atkinson, and then Councillor Mr. Bell. John?
Thank you, Chair. I have to support George Richardson's comments about increasing the number. It's one of my constant beefs that we give planning permission, and then what we do is we find that the developers are coming back asking for relaxation, asking for extra numbers, and it happens all the time, and I always get cross about it. For exactly the same reasons that Councillor Richardson gets cross about it, but I absolutely agree with him that in this situation we have no grounds to refuse that increase in numbers. I wish to speak, Chair, for a short while about the proposal that we have, the planning condition proposed by the local member, Mr. David Hall. And I have to say that I just cannot support that we should have such a planning condition applied. My main problem with it is procedural, in as much as we do not have the power to impose that. We would have to go to a third party, we would have to go through a process, and sort of that process will very likely fail. All of us have tried to get to changes to speed limits in our wards. We know how difficult it is, and so then we left ourselves with, and Henry Jones put his finger on the problem here. We have the possibility that we're going to apply a planning condition which actually, even with the best will in the world, the applicant might not be able to achieve because it depends upon a third party. And so what do you do then? Sort of we've in effect refused planning permission sort of on something that we did not have the power. Councillor Jewell's correct. This is out with the concerns of a planning committee. So I would not agree on that. You've got to be careful here, because where road safety is concerned, councillors find it very, very difficult to make this kind of decision, because you're always open to the accusation, you rotters, do you not care about road safety? Do you not care about those poor people who are going to be killed when sort of for a reduction of 2 miles an hour, they may just be injured? And of course we care about that, but planning is about something different. And again, Councillor Jewell put his finger on this, sort of it's about are the proposals sufficient to meet the bar of planning acceptability? And we have been instructed that they certainly do, and that changing the speed limit, moving this speed limit would not change anything. And given the fact that it may fail, sort of which throws the whole thing into chaos, we would have to choose, Henry's right, we'd have to choose some very, very careful wording, which would basically say, well, it'd be nice to have a try at this, but sort of if it fails, it can go ahead anyway, which is a stupid condition to put on. I think the fact is that what we have to say is we have to say we don't put a planning condition on, and if the local members feel very strongly about this, there are mechanisms by which they can post hoc apply for that planning thing to be moved, and they should go about that this way, that this isn't something that can be applied at this stage in the application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I've got Councillor Jim Atkinson, who wishes to come back. Then I've got Councillor Alan Bell, and I've got Councillor Mark Wilkes, who is seconding Councillor Bell. So, Jim, Councillor Atkinson.
Yes, I just wanted to say again that my proposal is fully about the application that's in front of me. These caveats come in all the time, like, and quite often you can't get your head around them. But it's also endorsed by what John's told us. With the 40 years experience he has, I can only go on that explanation with the answer to this question that's just come up. So as far as I'm concerned, my proposal is solely on this application that's here and now, right? And I also said at the time, anything that's not safe, if a sign's in the wrong place or anything, surely there's something we can do outside of this planning agreement here. So as far as I'm concerned, I just want to make sure everybody understands that my proposals with John's recommendation or advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So we've got Councillor Alan Bell, and then I've got Councillor Mark Wilkes, who's going to second Councillor Bell, and then we'll go direct to the vote. Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I did say in the beginning, John, that I would listen to everybody else to see how the debate unfolded. And obviously, I'm listening to everybody, and I said in the beginning of my discussion, like 100%, I respect what John, his professional opinion, and absolutely. But I did want to hear of the people's perception on it and explore all the options if there was an option to put the condition on. However, obviously the support's not there, so I'm happy to remove that. Not put forward that condition. I also thank Mark for wanting to second it at the same time, but happy just to move straight to the vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for that, John, and thank you for the way you've handled that. Councillor Mr. Wilkes, and then we'll go straight to the vote.
Well, I'll have to withdraw that seconding because there's nobody actually willing to do that. But I would just make the point that some of the members have commented, if local members want to do something, they should go away and try and find somewhere to get the money from to do something. Not every local member has a whole raft of money in their area to be able to spend on a 20 mile an hour or 30 mile an hour or changing a speed limit. And I think we just need to bear that in mind, that when developers can get away with only giving you half of the money that they're supposed to on public art, for example, in this example, it's a 20 million plus scheme, this, of housing. Houses are going to be selling there at £250,000. I fail to understand why a measure can't be put in place when moving this speed limit, which helps to reduce the speeds down to the level that the officer would be happy with, at a very low cost, probably even less than a 5-figure sum, which in a development of a £20 million just strikes me as it just doesn't seem reasonable to me that we can't do these things.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll go now straight to Neil, our solicitor. Neil, Mr. Cartneil, will you do the roll call of members and the members' votes? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the vote on the motion to approve the application in accordance with the officer's recommendation. So I'm going to come to each member alphabetically and ask if you're for or against, or whether you're abstaining. So I'll start with Councillor Jim Atkinson.
Yes, I'm for the motion, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Alan Bell.
For the motion, Neil. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Councillor John Clare.
Approve.
Thank you. Councillor Katie Corrigan.
For the motion, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ivan Jewell.
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Audrey Lang.
Approve the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce Maitland.
For.
Thank you. Councillor George Richardson.
Against.
Councillor Alan Shield.
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor John Shuttleworth.
Approve.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Mark Wilkes.
Rather begrudgingly, for.
Okay. Chair, that's 4 in favour and 1 against.
Chair, you didn't ask my vote.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Tinsley, I did miss you out.
Yeah, for the motion.
For the motion, okay. Chair, that's 11 for and 1 against.
Thank you very much. So therefore that application is approved. With item 6, we have no other business. So before I close the meeting, may I thank everyone who's taken part, and to the members of the public and the media who've watched the meeting, thank you for joining us. That concludes the business. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. See you later.